Welcome to Bard's Gaming Corner. This year has been pretty good for fans of the isometric RPG genre. Earlier this summer, the full version of the tactical RPG Solasta, Crown of the Magister, was released, and last week 2 games became available as well. Black Geyser, a fun low-budget RPG, and of course Pathfinder Wrath of the Righeous by Owlcat Games. There was already quite some buzz about this game, many fellow YouTubers putting out Let's Play videos of the beta version. Now the full version can be bought and played. Wrath of the Righeous is the spiritual successor to Pathfinder Kingmaker, a very successful RPG from 2018, which was inspired by the Pathfinder tabletop games. After a rocky start and some much needed updates, Pathfinder Kingmaker became one of the best RPGs in the last years. Let's see if Wrath of the Righeous keeps the winning streak of Owlcat Games alive. Story. The same setting and world is used in Wrath of the Righeous as in the original game. The story takes place sometime after the events of Kingmaker, and you will come across some well-known faces and references to the Stolen Lands. But other than that, it is more of a spiritual successor than an actual successor. Your character starts in the kingdom of Mendath in the city of Kenabres, which is embroiled in a continuous war against the demons. You hardly get any time to get acquainted with your character and the city. Almost immediately, Kenabres is overrun by a bloodthirsty horde of demons and cultists, led by an enormous demon lord. From that point, it's a continuous fight for survival, finding the few survivors and trying to reclaim Kenabres. With Kingmaker, the pace was more leisurely, even though some quests had a time limit. With Wrath of the Righeous, it's almost non-stop action and fighting right from the start. Your party members all range from the typical RPG tropes, with some individual interesting characteristics. Either an idealistic paladin who was raised on the streets, a pragmatic self-serving rogue, or a quite interesting, arrogant, hedonistic cleric, who basically only joined your party because demons crashed his eyes wide shut party. They're all fleshed out quite well, each of them has a good backstory and motive. Since Baldur's Gate 2 and the Mass Effect series, having interesting party members is almost a given for a successful RPG, and Wrath of the Righeous does this to a T. Overall, this is a classic good versus evil kind of story. Well, that's a given since you're fighting demons. However, while the story may not be the most original, it's all done quite well. Gameplay. This is a typical isometric RPG in the same vein as Pillars of Eternity or the granddaddy of them all, Baldur's Gate, so don't expect too many new gameplay features. Everything is done quite well, however. You build a character from scratch in a medieval European setting and start exploring the world. There have been a couple of improvements and changes compared to Pathfinder Kingmaker. For instance, you don't need to buy a lot of camping supplies anymore for when you need to rest. The conversations between party members when you rest are still there. In my opinion, those are a little bit redundant. And one big improvement is that you can rotate the camera. You couldn't before. There's one big caveat in this game. Building your first character can be very daunting. There are just too many choices to make, which class to pick, which race, etc. This was a problem in Kingmaker, and in Wrath of the Righeous they expanded the number of choices you can make. If you're a veteran in the Pathfinder gaming system or Dungeons & Dragons in general, this probably will come across as natural, but for a newbie you won't know where to start. Luckily, just choosing a generic class and race, a half-orc fighter for instance, will give you a rewarding gaming experience. But if you want to build and develop a truly interesting character as a newbie, you may need to consult some online guide. Fights, of whom there are a lot, can differ from easy to quite challenging. For most of the game you will cut through hordes of easily killed demons, but boss fights are more difficult. You will need to hone and improve your tactics for those. As with the original game, you can choose to either fight in real time or turn-based. Apart from the RPG element, you have a strategic element as well, just like in Kingmaker. You need to build armies of crusaders and pit them against the demon hordes. Battles are fought on a tactical map, very much reminiscent of the Heroes of Might and Magic series of old. I quite like these, they are fast and easy to master. While in Kingmaker the kingdom building part of the game was tedious and annoying, well, at least to me. Here, this building armies and managing armies element makes sense and is rather fun. Graphics. Since Wrath of the Righteous uses the same game engine as Kingmaker, the graphics are basically at the same level. Don't expect groundbreaking, picture-perfect graphics, but they do the job. This is a very colorful game with a slight cartoonish style overall. There are a couple of small improvements. For instance, you have some cutscenes which are done more impressively than its predecessor. For me, in such a game it's more about gameplay and story, but still the graphics are good. Sound. Sound effects overall are pretty good. You have the typical clanging and banging noises during battle, nothing new, but all done quite well. The voice acting is of an excellent level, it never feels hammy, but suits the tone of the game. The soundtrack is pretty good as well. In most areas you hear some haunting and melancholic songs, even more so with Kingmaker. Safe areas you will hear more jaunty tunes. In my humble opinion, this is the best RPG to come out this year. And with competition like Solasta Crown of the Magister, that is no mean feat. Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous is not the most original game out there, but what it does also well. Gameplay, story, character building, your companions, everything is done with care. And the game is very long as well. The intro alone will take you a couple of hours to finish, so there's plenty of gameplay for you to sink your teeth in. There are a couple of minor downers. As I've said, choosing the right character build as a newbie can be very daunting, and there are some small bugs. For instance, when you open your inventory, not everything will be shown right away at some instances. But these are very small, minor nuisances. If you're a fan of RPGs, you can't go wrong with Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous. I give this game an 8 out of 10.